A pregnant young woman, abandoned by the father of her child, meets a stranger on a lonely road. He decides to protect her honor by pretending to be her husband, never expecting to fall in love himself. He stood up to her stern father, worked with his bare hands, and in their darkest hour, saved them all. This is a story about love, born in the most unexpected place. Welcome to Heartland Stories. I'm Ethan Hale, and here I share true stories about honor, kindness, and quiet strength. Today I'm going to tell you about John, a former cavalryman just trying to start over, and about Rose, a girl caught in a moment of quiet desperation. Together, they'll walk the line between pretending and feeling, between lies and redemption. Can John earn the respect of Rose's unforgiving father? Will they find the right to love in a world where honor matters more than truth? If you're ready to see how a lie told for good can lead to real love, hit like, and let's begin. John's horse moved slow, like it didn't care where the road led. Dust rose behind them, and the hills rolled out ahead, dry grass and crooked trees on both sides. John Carroll rode steady, but his eyes were hollow. Ever since the war ended, he hadn't felt at home anywhere. He'd gone back once, to his small town tucked up against the Sierra foothills. Thought maybe someone there would be waiting. A woman named Loretta, the one he married in a rush before he shipped out. Back then it felt right. A ring on his finger, a letter in his chest pocket, the promise that they'd start fresh when he came home. But when he walked through the door, she looked at him like he was a stranger. No hug, no smile, just a cool voice saying, "You've changed." Truth was, they both had. There was no warmth left, just polite words over a quiet kitchen table. After a week, he packed his bag and left without saying goodbye. Since then, John had been riding aimlessly, anywhere the memories didn't follow. Up ahead, a broken-down way station came into view. Weather-worn sign, sagging roof, a dry old well. He pulled the reins and the horse stopped. Climbing down, he headed for the water bucket. That's when he heard a soft gasp. He turned and saw her. She was sitting on a log nearby. Pale dress, hands clasped tight in her lap. Hair coming loose, cheeks streaked with road dust. She looked like she was waiting on someone, or hiding from everyone. "You all right?" John asked, voice low and calm. She nodded, but the answer didn't match her eyes. Then she glanced at him, biting her lip for just a second. "I'm just waiting," she said quietly. Her belly, rounded beneath the dress, already told the part she wasn't saying. John didn't press, just nodded toward the well. "There's a little water left. I can get you some if you'd like." And with that simple offer, something began. A story neither of them saw coming. Rose drank the water slowly, like every movement took effort. John stood nearby, quiet, letting her take her time. The wind tugged lazily at the hem of her dress and kicked dust across the road. "Thank you," she said softly, setting the tin cup down on the edge of the well. "I've been walking since morning. Just needed a place to stop." John nodded. The way he looked at her, calm, steady, was the kind of look that comes from someone who's seen too much to be surprised by much else. "Where you headed?" he asked. She looked down. "Home. Valdez Creek. My father's got a vineyard out there. I haven't been back in over a year. Left for college in Sacramento. Family waiting for you?" She let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "My father doesn't wait. He expects. Wants me to do everything the right way. And I—" She trailed off, pressing her hands over her stomach. "I messed up." John said nothing, just listened. He already knew this wasn't just some tired traveler. "He left me," she said suddenly. "A professor. Said he cared, said he loved me, but when I told him about the baby, he vanished." Her voice trembled, but she didn't cry. She looked like someone who had cried too much already. "If my father finds out, he won't forgive me. This is shame to him. To all of us." John rubbed his face, took a breath. He could see where this was going. "What is it you want from me?" he asked, his voice low, but firm. She looked up. Her eyes were sky blue and full of something close to desperation. "Just pretend to be my husband. Just for a few days. So he doesn't throw me out, or worse. Please." John took a step back, instinctively. I don't lie like that. That's not who I am." "Please," she said again. "I'm not asking for forever. I've got nowhere else to go, and no one else to ask." He turned away, tightened his jaw. He knew what it felt like to not be wanted, to not have a soul left in the world. Slowly, He turned back. You sure this is the only way? Rose nodded. Yes. It's the only way he'll let me through the front gate. He paused. Then, finally. All right. Just for a couple days. She closed her eyes and exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath all day. John stood in the middle of the road, dust swirling lazily around his boots. His chest felt tight. He didn't usually get involved in other people's messes, especially not ones that required lies. But there was something in Rose's eyes. Not just fear. It was emptiness. That quiet, cold kind he'd seen in towns left behind after shelling. Only this time, it wasn't war. It was life. He wiped the sweat from his neck and let out a long breath. Well then, he said. I guess I'm your husband now. He said it simply, like he was agreeing to carry someone's pack, not rewrite the next chapter of his own life. Rose nodded, though her face was still tense. She didn't look relieved, just unsure if she could believe him. Thank you, she whispered. Just don't say too much. Stand by me. I'll explain. What do I call you? Just so I don't mess it up, he asked, offering a small, crooked smile. Rose. Just Rose. He nodded. Well then, you're Mrs. Carroll now. She smiled, barely. But in that flicker was something warm, something cautious. Like she was still bracing herself in case he changed his mind. You got a horse? He asked. She shook her head. No. I walked from the last mail cart. It wouldn't go any farther. He held out his hand. Come on, then. Hop up with me. Shouldn't be more than an hour's ride. Rose hesitated, then placed her hand in his. For the first time, she looked him straight in the eye. You're really gonna do this? If I'm already lying, John said, climbing into the saddle, might as well see it through. They rode off together, the sun sinking behind them. The road ahead was just as dusty. But now, it wasn't empty. And behind them was a secret they'd have to carry side by side. As the vineyard Rose came into view, Rose's hands tightened around her waist. John could feel the tension in her back as she sat behind him on the saddle. The ranch set up on a low hill, simple buildings, a weathered barn, a wide house with a wraparound porch, and an old tree spreading its limbs like arms across the front yard. The air smelled of dust, hay, and the sour sweet trace of fermenting grapes. This is it, Rose whispered. John gave a small nod and pulled back on the reins. The horse came to a slow stop by the gate. On the porch stood a tall man in a worn-out shirt, sleeves rolled, eyes sharp and steady. Gray streaks touched his dark hair and thick mustache. Next to him stood a woman in black, small and thin, with delicate hands wrapped around a teacup. Her silver hair was pinned up in a soft bun, and though her face was lined, her eyes held a gentle warmth. That was Nana Lena, Don Martino's mother, Rose's grandmother. The heart of the family. That's Don Martino, Rose said quietly. My father. They dismounted. John stepped forward first, removing his hat. Good afternoon, sir. Martino didn't answer. He looked John up and down, then shifted his gaze to Rose. After a beat, he spoke. Who are you? John Carroll, he replied calmly. I'm your daughter's husband. The air tensed, like right before thunder. Martino narrowed his eyes. Husband? He asked, turning to Rose. You got married and said nothing? It happened fast, Rose said, swallowing. In Sacramento. I was alone, and we didn't want to wait. Martino didn't respond. He turned sharply and walked back inside without another word. Nana Lena stepped forward. She looked at John, long enough to really see him, but her expression stayed kind. Then she turned to Rose. You look tired, my child, she said softly. Come inside. Your husband, too, he looks like he could use some rest. Rose nodded without a word. Her face was tight, strained like a held breath. As they walked to the house, she kept glancing at John, as if she was bracing for him to turn around and walk away. But he didn't. He walked steady, like a man who'd made up his mind. Inside, the kitchen smelled like fresh bread and stewed peppers. At the table, eyes followed them. Rose's sister, her younger brother, 2 ranch hands. No one spoke, but John felt the weight of their thoughts. Something doesn't add up. It'll come out eventually. Nana served the food and took a seat beside them. She didn't say much, but the way she looked at them, especially at John, made it clear she saw more than she let on. And maybe, just maybe, she had already forgiven whatever she saw coming. When John took Rose's hand across the table, simply, the way a husband would, she didn't pull away. This family didn't know who he really was. But John knew one thing for sure. Lying to them would be a lot harder than he'd thought. The night was still. Crickets chirped beyond the barn walls, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then fell silent. John lay on a pile of hay, one arm tucked behind his head. Moonlight slipped through the cracks in the roof above, casting silver lines across the wooden beams. In that pale glow, his mind took him somewhere he didn't want to go back to. Flash. Blast. Screaming. A kid from Mississippi, green as spring grass, always smiling like nothing could touch him. But something did. A piece of shrapnel caught him in the chest. He died right there in John's arms. And John kept waking up. Each day, there were fewer faces left. Now they came back in dreams, those same dusty uniforms, those same young eyes, staring at nothing. He rolled onto his side, staring up at the rafters. Loretta. He'd married her before shipping out, just like a lot of soldiers did. A letter in the breast pocket, a ring on a chain, something to hold on to make sense of things. He told himself they'd build a life when the war was over. A house, a family, something real. But when he came home, Loretta wasn't who he'd remembered. No warmth, no welcome, just walls and quiet and two strangers eating supper in silence. She hadn't been waiting for him, not the man who came back. Somewhere out there, she still carried his last name, but she didn't carry his heart anymore. John closed his eyes. The memories burned like a fever inside him. Then, a soft sound, barely a step. He turned. Rose stood in the doorway, a thin shawl around her shoulders, hair loose down her back. "I just wanted to make sure you were settled," she said, eyes dropping. "Is it cold?" "No," he answered quietly. "I'm good." She nodded. "Thank you for staying." "I said I would," John replied, surprised at how natural the words felt. She lingered for a moment longer, then gave the faintest smile and slipped away into the night. John lay back again, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't dream of war. At first light, John was already outside. He peeled off his shirt, down to a dusty white undershirt, rolled up his pants, and walked over to the water barrel. The sun wasn't high yet, but the heat was already creeping in, thick and sticky like molasses. He didn't wait to be asked. He walked straight up to the foreman, a quiet Mexican man named Javier, and said he was ready to work. No backstory, no explanations. Javier looked him over, gave a small shrug, and handed him a crate. From morning till midday, John hauled grape boxes, cleared weeds from the vineyard rows, and led horses to the watering trough. His hands were caked in dirt and sweat. Once he sliced his palm on a rusted hook, didn't flinch, just wrapped it in the tail of his shirt and kept going. At first, the workers eyed him with suspicion, but by noon, one of them nodded his way. Another passed him a cup of water. This vineyard wasn't just a job, it was a family. And in families, people earned their place. John wasn't about to be dead weight. Don Martino watched from the shade, saying nothing. His stare was sharp and cold. He didn't trust sudden husbands. Didn't trust men who showed up out of nowhere and worked like they owned the dirt beneath their boots. Rose stayed in the house most of the day. The heat, the nerves, the weight of it all had worn her down. Nana Lena insisted she rest. Later, when the sun started dipping behind the hills, Rose sat on the porch with a glass of lemonade in her hands. Nana joined her, and for a long while, neither of them said a word. They just watched John from a distance, shouldering crates, steady and silent. "He's not from here," Rose said softly. "But he works like this place belongs to him." Nana didn't smile, not really. It was something quieter, something sadder. "He's a good man," she said. "Don't pretend you don't care." Rose didn't answer. She just held her glass tighter. Out in the field, John wiped sweat from his face and removed his hat. Every motion felt like it pulled him a little closer to something that might finally mean peace. This wasn't just pretending anymore. Maybe it never was. The day was almost done, but something else was just starting to grow. Not in the vines, but between them. The sun was sinking behind the hills, painting the vineyard in deep amber light. The air had cooled, softer now, easier to breathe. The workers had gone. Only John and Rose remained. She'd insisted on helping, wanted to move around, be out in the field, feel like part of the place again. They walked slowly between the rows, tying back vines, plucking away brittle leaves. John kept an eye on her, bending to help when she reached too far. He didn't say much, just offered a quiet smile now and then. Never pushed. You never complain, she said suddenly, breaking the calm. Even in the heat. Even when my father looks at you like you're stealing from him. John shrugged. It's his land. I'm just a guest. And if I'm helping, might as well do it right. Rose looked at him then, at his dirt-streaked hands, the sunburn across his neck. And for the first time since she came home, she laughed. Not forced. Not polite. A real laugh. Light and unexpected. John stopped walking. What? You're just odd, she said, smiling. Not in a bad way. You could have left back at that station. But you didn't. You stayed. And you're working like this is your vineyard. He chuckled. I don't regret it. Not a bit. She fell quiet. Then asked, almost in a whisper. What if it were real? John looked at her. Long and quiet. His eyes softened, but he didn't speak. She looked away, suddenly unsure. Maybe even sorry, she asked. But something in her chest felt warmer than it had in weeks. Not because of his words, but because of how he looked at her. The next morning, 3 women were already perched on the bench outside the corner store. Mrs. Hughes, the town widow who knew everyone's business. Mrs. O'Brien, tight-lipped and always suspicious. And round little Louise, the butcher's wife, who never missed a good bit of gossip. Their voices were low but sharp, like clothespins snapping on a line. I saw that John fellow, Mrs. Hughes began. Too quiet. Polite, sure, but there's something off. Too good to be true, Mrs. O'Brien added. Doesn't argue. Doesn't go to town. Did Rose ever mention him before she showed up with a ring and a belly? He keeps his mouth shut like he's hiding something, Louise chimed in. And just like that, he's part of the family? I don't buy it. And Rose? O'Brien asked. She's pregnant and barely speaks. Like she doesn't even know what to make of him. That's not how real marriages start. Smells like a cover-up to me. By the next day, those same words, twisted and passed along, found their way to Don Martino. One of the ranch hands overheard and mumbled something while they were sharpening tools. Don sat near the edge of the field, cleaning his knife. He didn't react, not outwardly. But his jaw tightened. That evening at supper, he said nothing. Just watched. Watched Rose. Watched John. And the more John stayed silent, the louder those voices became in Don's head. Something didn't add up. The sun was dropping behind the hills when John walked toward the barn, tools in hand. The vines glowed in the red-gold light. But before he reached the door, Don Martino stepped out from the shadows, arms crossed, eyes dark and hard. We need to talk, he said flatly. No greeting. No pretense. John set the crate down. Nodded. They walked behind the house, out of earshot. Who are you? Don asked. Straight to the point. You're not who you say you are. Too clean for a soldier. Too quiet. Too perfect. John stood tall. No excuses. No denial. My name is real, he said. I served in the cavalry. Came home. Spent a while feeling lost. Then I met Rose. And you just decided to marry her? Don let out a cold chuckle. Come on. You got someone else? Wife? Kids? John clenched his jaw. Hesitated. There was someone. But we're not together. Haven't been for a long time. It was never real. Just a ring and a mistake. Then why are you here? Don asked. What's this to you? She was alone, John answered. And I couldn't just ride away. That's all. That's all. Don stepped closer. You come onto my land, into my house, into my daughter's life, and that's all? Yes, John said calmly. Sometimes a man does something not because he has to, but because it's the right thing to do. Silence settled in like dust. Don stared at him, trying to pull something deeper from his eyes. Something hidden. If you want, John said at last, I'll leave. Tonight. I didn't come here to make trouble for you, or for her. His voice was steady. No fear. No fight. Just truth. And then they both heard it, soft footsteps from around the corner. They turned. Rose stood there, clutching the fabric of her dress in both hands. Tears already streaked her cheeks. You'd really leave, she whispered. Just like that. I never wanted to come between you and your family, John said gently. That was never the plan. And her voice broke. I don't even know what family is anymore. If you leave, I'll be alone all over again. John stepped toward her. She turned away and walked off, wiping her eyes with the back of her sleeve. Don watched her go, then turned back to John. She's fragile, he said. but stronger than she looks. And if you break her, you'll have to live with that. He left John standing there, alone with the weight of his own heart. Evening draped the barn in a long, heavy shadow over the scorched earth. The air was warm and still, filled with the scent of dry soil and ripening grapes. John stood against the wooden wall, shoulder pressed into the boards. He hadn't eaten since supper. Sleep felt miles away. Everything inside him was tight, like a pain with no clear place to land. He heard her footsteps before he saw her. Soft, careful, but he knew it was her. "I figured I'd find you out here," Rose said as she stopped beside him. "I didn't want you hearing that conversation," John muttered, still facing the dark. "But maybe it was bound to happen. You really planning to leave?" He turned to her. Her face was tired, eyes heavy, but the look in them was full of something raw, like she was holding herself together by a single thread. "I can't keep lying," he said quietly. "Not to you. Not to myself. I came here to help. That's all. But something changed. You changed something. In me." He took a slow step closer. "I don't have a name for it. I just know that when I wake up, I wonder where you are. When you smile, it's like I can breathe again. And when I hear I'm supposed to walk away, it tears me up inside. Rose, I love you." She stood there, hands clenched, lips trembling. Then she stepped toward him. "I love you too," she whispered. "But it's all so broken. The lies. My family. The way people look at us. This isn't some storybook ending. My father won't forgive. The town won't forget. We started off wrong. What if it's real now?" John asked. "If I could do it over again, I'd still stay. I'd still choose you." She looked at him through tears, not flinching this time. "I'm scared, John. What if we're just not meant to be?" He didn't argue. He just took her hand. "Maybe we're not," he said gently. "But I'm still here." They stood there in silence, under a sky full of stars that, somehow, shined a little brighter that night. The morning came thick with heat, too warm for that early hour. Don Martino sat on the porch, sipping his coffee when the mailman came by, an old-timer with a canvas sack and a limp. He handed off a few letters, and Don sifted through them slowly. One envelope made him pause. John Carroll. The name was scrawled in a woman's hand. Don tore it open and scanned the lines. "You haven't answered my letters. If you want a divorce, say so. But don't just disappear like that. We were married, after all." Don's face went red. His grip crushed the paper. "You're married?" he roared, his voice echoing across the yard. Workers froze. John, just returning on horseback, stopped mid-step with the reins in his hand. "I was," he said calmly. "But that's behind me. We haven't been together in a long time." "You lied." Don stormed forward. "To my daughter. To my family. To me. You didn't just show up here. You wormed your way into our lives carrying filth behind your back." "I never meant to fool anyone," John said firmly. "It started out as a favor. But it's not fake anymore. I love her." "Shut your mouth," Don snapped. His voice turned cold, deadly. "Pack your things. Get off my land. Today, before I throw you off myself." John didn't argue. He nodded once. "I understand." He turned and walked toward the barn. Didn't say another word. Didn't look back. From the porch, Rose stepped out. She'd heard enough. One hand went to her mouth as she watched him go, step by step, without a single glance over his shoulder. John sat by the fire, just beyond the edge of the vineyard. An old canvas sack served as a seat, and his saddlebag lay open beside him like a makeshift table. In his hands, a torn sheet of paper and a worn-down pencil stub. He stared at the blank page for a long while. Then his hand began to move, and the words came like a tide breaking loose. "Loretta, I'm writing because I can't keep living between the lines. We married in a rush, on nerves and hope and fear of the future. I thought it was the right thing. Maybe you just didn't want to be alone. But we were never really a family. You know that, just like I do. When I came back from war, I was looking for home. What we had wasn't home. Just walls. Just silence. We became strangers, Loretta. And I can't live like that anymore. I've met someone. It's not a fling. It's not an accident. She's the kind of person a man stays for. The kind of person that makes you want to become better just to deserve her. With her, I'm not pretending. With her, I feel real. So I'm asking you, let me go? Let me start over. With honesty. With her. Without dragging the past behind me. If you agree, just write back one word. Yes. I'm not asking you to understand. Just to let me go. John. He folded the letter carefully, slid it into an envelope, and wrote out the address. Tomorrow, he'd hand it off to the next mail coach headed east. For now, he just sat there in the dark, watching the flames flicker and curl skyward, each spark a quiet reminder that sometimes life can catch fire again, if it's not too late. The night was thick and heavy, too warm, too quiet. One of those nights when sleep feels far away, and you can't shake the feeling that something's coming. John lay on a blanket near a creek, just outside the vineyard's edge. It was where he'd set up camp after he left, far enough to be unseen, but close enough to feel the pull of the place. Now and then, he heard the distant yelps of coyotes, but tonight, they'd gone silent too soon. Then he saw it. A glow behind the ridge, orange and rising, not like lightning, not like sunset. It moved. It breathed. And smoke trailed upward like a warning. He stood, listened. Then came the shouts, the low roar. Fire. John didn't hesitate. He threw the saddle on his horse without tightening the cinch, swung up, and kicked hard. The stirrups slapped against the animal's sides as they charged down the road. His mind was locked in, like it had been in combat. That sharp, cold stillness when you don't know what's on the other side of the hill. As he neared the vineyard, smoke hit him in the face. The air was thick and sweet, too sweet. The kind that chokes before you know it's in your lungs. Flames were already licking the edge of the vines. Voices cried out. People ran. Someone yelled a name. John hit the ground running, nearly stumbled, but caught himself. Snatched a bucket near the barrel and sprinted toward the fire. No one had time to ask what he was doing there. In the chaos, he saw her. Rose. Standing in the middle of it all, wet rag over her mouth, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping a bucket she could barely lift. She was trying. But it wasn't enough. And then, Rose. She turned. John, covered in dust and smoke, eyes burning bright through the black on his face. You came back? She gasped. He didn't answer. Just grabbed her empty bucket and ran for water. The fire was pushing toward the barn now. A few men tried fighting it with jackets and shovels, but embers flew past them, catching dry brush near the storage shed. John saw it and ran. Water, shovel, canvas, he used whatever he could get his hands on. One of the workers slipped and went down near the flames. John dove through the smoke, hauled him out by the arms, coughing hard. His own skin was burning, his sleeve already scorched. But he didn't stop. Over and over, he threw himself at the flames, knocking them back, fighting like it was his land, his crop, his home. And Don Martino watched. From the hillside, he saw it all. Saw the man who stepped into the fire when others stepped back. Saw him carry a wounded hand like he'd done it 100 times. Saw him fall to his knees, exhausted, when the last of the flames began to die. When the smoke finally thinned and the vines stopped glowing. John sat beside a scorched row, breathing heavy. Ash clung to his arms. His hand was raw and blistered. He didn't speak, didn't complain. He just sat there, quiet. Don walked up to him, said nothing at first, just looked down at the man who'd risked everything for people who still weren't sure if he belonged. Then, finally, "Get up," he said. John looked up, confused. Don's voice came again. Softer, firmer. "Get up. We need you." And in those 4 words, there was more than forgiveness. There was something John hadn't heard in a long, long time. Belonging. Respect. Home. The day after the fire began in silence. No loud voices. No rush. Everyone moved slowly, like the ground itself was still trying to recover from the night before. A thin line of smoke drifted over the vineyard, and the morning sun felt softer than usual, gentler somehow. John sat beside a water barrel, wrapping his burned hand with a strip of clean cloth. The workers passed by, nodding quietly. Someone left a chunk of bread beside him. Someone else set down a canteen. He thanked them without words, just a glance, a nod. It wasn't until near sunset that Don Martino came over. In his hand, an old tin flask of wine. He sat down slowly, saying nothing for a long time. Then finally, in a low voice, "I was wrong." John looked at him, but didn't speak. "You know," Don went on, "in this family, we put a lot of weight on how things start. But what matters more is how a man finishes." He looked out over the singed rows of vines. "You could have left. You could have stood back, but you didn't. He paused and said, "It doesn't matter how you and Rose began. What matters is you stayed, and that makes you one of us." He handed the flask to John. John took a sip, gave a small nod. Still no words. Didn't need them. A few steps away, Rose stood watching, her hand covering her mouth like if she breathed too hard, the moment might break. But instead of tears, something else filled her eyes. A smile. Real. Quiet. Bright. The kind that comes when a weight lifts you never thought would leave. Nana Lena walked over and gently wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "There it is," she whispered. "Now it's right. Family isn't blood. It's who you choose." Rose looked at John then. Really looked. Not like someone bracing to be hurt, but like someone who finally believed. He wasn't going anywhere. And John looked back at her with the kind of eyes that only belong to a man who's lost too much, and finally found something worth holding on to. The sun was just starting to rise over the hills, casting a soft golden glow across the vineyard. The air was cool and fresh, filled with the scent of damp earth and grape leaves. A new day. John walked between the rows, a basket in his hands. A few steps behind, Rose moved slowly. Her belly had grown. She supported her back with one hand, but her face carried a quiet, tired, contented smile. John waited for her without a word, just reached out his hand. She placed hers in his. Together, they bent over the vines, gently cutting clusters of grapes, placing them in the basket. There was no hurry, no need to speak, just calm, steady movement, like they'd been doing this their whole lives. Birds chirped in the trees. A soft breeze rustled the leaves. John stood and looked at her. She looked back, clear and steady. No questions, no fear, just understanding. He reached out, brushed her cheek with his fingers. She gave a small nod. It was quiet. It was simple. It was enough. Everything was going to be okay. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Here on Heartland Stories, we share simple but powerful stories about love and people who don't give up. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode of Heartland Stories.